Guys, in the last video, we talked about what do you do? What happens when you pull up to a gas station and you need to put gas in your vehicle because you're running late to work or to one of my classes? And you see a sign that looks like this: gas shortage. Sorry, not for you. Nothing here. Go on up the road. I mean, just imagine we live on the coast. Hurricane season comes. Think about what goes on. Everyone goes out. They crawl out from every road that they live on. They come out, they flood the gas stations, they take up all the gas, and then think about the days and days that you can go without no gas at all, period, at the gas stations. I mean, it happened with Hurricane Florence as it came through a year or two ago, right? Okay, you would go to a gas station. They had no gas. Everything was roped off. Everything was bagged up. What do? You can't get out. You can't get in. No gas for even generators if your power goes out. Again, we have become reliant quite a bit on this concept of fuel, or what we call gas. Well, the issue here is that gasoline also has played a major role many different times throughout history. 2012, the average gas price was $3.79, folks, for 1 gallon. In California, the average price was $4.36. I mean, as you can tell on this sign, this was average, okay? This includes the lowball figures as well as the higher figures. There were areas in the United States that you would go to, and a gallon of gas, of course, would be over $5 for every gallon. You can imagine what this did on people's pocketbooks during this time. This was a lot of money. This was 27 cents higher than 2011. It was $1.04 higher than in 2010. So as you can imagine, what people do is that they decide to look at all of these totals on this board and say, what on earth? What on earth am I doing? Should I really go out on that wasteful trip just to go out and drive around? Because if I do, then this is money that I'm going to have to put into my gas tank. And this money that I'm putting into my gas tank is just getting burned up and wasted just because I don't want to sit home. Well, as you can tell, the demand fell tremendously during this time. Not only did the demand fall, but cars like SUVs, the sales of those cars began to plummet. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Hummer, but the Hummer sales took off in the early 2000s. Everybody wanted a Hummer. You weren't anyone unless you had the Hummer. Big fancy ride. Well, the problem is that these things were like 10 and 12 miles a gallon. And then when this price gouging began to happen at the gas pump, no one could afford to drive the vehicle anymore because it took so much gas in order to get to wherever you were going. So not only that, it hurt the car industry as well. Again, people's lives began to change, and it was strongly tied to the fuel industry. Why did this happen? Part of the reason was foreign oil. Foreign oil in 2012 was $110 a barrel. At the time that I'm reading or I'm recording this video, we actually do have oil prices that went negative. Big change from just a handful of years ago. Domestic oil. There was a problem that was happening here as well. 2012, 2010, during these years, what was going on in the United States? The gas prices went up, up, up. We became more dependent on foreign oil, more so now than ever. And that's because during these years, refineries in the U.S., they were closing. It forced us to become dependent. Now, does that really actually make sense? Why did your United States government think it was a good idea to close refineries in the United States, to halt and limit the production of oil in the United States, and become even more reliant on foreign oil during that time. In addition, foreign oil knew that this was going on. They knew people had to have it. So if you know people have to have your product, and you know they're not really getting the product anywhere else, a monopoly begins to happen. You can begin to charge however much you want on a barrel of oil, and they were getting it. They were ripping the United States. They were ripping other countries that were purchasing oil from them. And in addition, they were ripping your wallet because of this. Why? Why was the United States closing refineries? It was probably due to people like this. It was probably due to these groups and these organizations that had a very strong tie to politics during that time, that basically had the ears of certain politicians in Washington, where they could go through and do these types of things. Make them happy. They're voters. If you make these groups happy, these environmental groups, all of these are voters that would be for you in the future as well, and we can't turn our backs on them. So what better argument to say that you're environmental friendly, that you're against big oil companies because they're billionaires and make a lot of money, but at the same time you were punishing the average United States citizen that was driving up and down the roads to try to get to school and to try to get to work. It was their wallets that were paying for it, not Washington's. If you take a look at this graph, here is a trend. What kind of trend is happening here? If we take a look at 2008 and we go up, right here is the price of oil during 2008, a little bit after 2008. All right, it skyrocketed. I mean, we're looking at almost $130 a barrel here. But what's kind of funny is that 2008 was a political season. 2008, we had an election. And right before 2008, because those elections happened in November, right? Look at what happens to the price of oil. Plummets. Well, the election was over with, and after the election, look at what happens to the price of oil. It begins to go up, 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 up. 2008 goes by. 2012 goes by. We have another election. It's slightly dipped, but another 8 years' time or 4 years' time, which is a total of 8 years, we get closer to about 2016. Another election was coming up in about a year's time. Look at what happens to the price of oil. It plummets yet again. 2016, we had an election. After that election was over with, November 2016, look at what happens to the price of oil. It goes up, but really not what it was doing in the past. And now, like I said before, we are in the negatives. Whoa. Look at how this has plummeted. There's got to be a reason. Well, there's a couple of reasons here. Number one, the U.S. finally became foreign oil dependent, or independent. Sorry. We no longer have to rely on other people for our oil reserves anymore. We are producing what we are using, and we are exporting what we don't use. We have enough in our basically savings account of oil in our reserves that we are perfectly fine at this point. Another thing that happened during this year is, of course, a coronavirus. COVID-19 hit. COVID-19 told everybody to stay at home. So the demand disappears. If the demand disappears and you're not going to the gas station to purchase gas anymore, what happens to the price? They've got to sell it or it goes bad. Gasoline goes bad, folks. So they've got to sell it, so they sell it cheap. So that way you're more prone to go and you're more prone to buy it, and we can move it a little bit better. So basically what I'm saying is that oil is very strongly tied to politics. It's very strongly tied to government agencies. It is strongly tied to DC and whoever is in charge during that time. And it was strongly tied to foreign countries as well. So what we want to ensure from this point on is that this does not happen. We're not charged an arm and a leg at the gas pump just to put in this resource that we need in our vehicles to do our daily jobs. Whether that daily job is to go to work or go to school or go to a protest, we have to put that energy resource in our vehicles to function. But once again, it's more than just gas. The oil industry is tied to such a large number of different products that it really just doesn't stop here. We're only looking at one piece of that alphabet soup. We're only looking at the letter G for gas. There's tons of other products that come from that petroleum. Those products are very important. Those products we have to have as well for our daily lives. And for that reason, this industry is not going to go anywhere. We'll always have coal, maybe not so much, but in the future, coal might take another surge. We'll always have natural gas at this point. We'll always have petroleum at this point. We need a lot more work in order to get these alternative energy sources to become more mainstream. Why? Folks, they're just not as efficient. How many windmills do you need to give you the energy that petroleum would give you? How many solar panels would you need in order to give you the energy that petroleum would give you? Huge amounts. It's not a day. In addition, solar panels, well, most of them require land. You have to build them. You want us to whop out forest? You want us to cut down trees? You want us to destroy the environment because you're an environmentalist who wants a solar panel on a field. And if we're talking about the environment and the wildlife, do you know that many of the solar panel farms report that so many birds actually die because they fly over the solar panels and they are generating so much heat that it basically fries them in midair? No one really wants to talk about those issues, do they? No one really wants to talk about, if you do want to put a solar panel in, what along does that bring with it? Because those are things that people don't want to talk about. They have this idea, this utopian idea, that a solar panel can just easily go up in midair, and this is an alternative energy source. And it is. It does generate energy. But what's the cost in order to do that? How efficient is that energy? How far can that get us? Those are the questions that we struggle with. And this is one of the reasons that those areas have not taken off like they have, or maybe like they should have many number of years ago, because we just need to improve the technology. That's going to require some time, and it might never happen. Solar and wind and water, all of these are great ideas. But there's only so much that we can do with them. How much can we actually improve on them? That's the problem. So, with that said, you now know you are dependent on oil. You now know that you require it to go out and do your daily routines. Or anytime you go through the drive-thru and you get that plastic cup with the plastic straw that's tied to the oil industry. Anytime you get onto the road and you're driving your car down the asphalt, that's related to the oil industry. Anytime you use a piece of rubber, that's the oil industry. Something made out of rubber, that's the oil industry. You are tied to them more than ever. You might just not have realized it before. So now that we know this, what are some of the sources of early fuel? Has it always been gas? Has it always been these big oil companies in charge? Have we always been dependent upon these resources? Or have there been other things out there as well? Have we gotten better with science? Have we gotten better with technology to give us these alternatives? A person might want to say yes, but you might be surprised. So in the next video, we'll talk about these early fuel sources. What were they? What do we do? What happened with them? Where did they go? Are they still around? Again, those are the questions you'll get answers to in the next one.